Poor Omega saved a wounded stranger in the forest, not knowing he was the ruthless Alpha King. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Lily Carter had always been told she was weak. She had grown up in a pack that valued strength above all else. And as an Omega, her place was always beneath the others. The whispering voices, the pitying glances, they followed her everywhere, reminding her of what she wasn't: strong, powerful, worthy. For years, Lily had tried to ignore it, to find peace in the solitude of the forest where she had sought refuge. Her days were spent foraging, gathering what little she could from the land, and avoiding the pack that had cast her aside. But in her heart, there was always a yearning, a desire to belong, to be seen not for her weakness but for her kindness. It was in the forest, as she wandered among the trees, that she first found him. A man, no older than her, lying in a pool of his own blood. His face was hidden beneath a tangled mess of hair, but there was something in his presence that made Lily pause. His clothes were torn, his body bruised and battered. He was unlike anyone she had ever seen. Her instincts screamed at her to turn away, to leave him to his fate, but Lily could not. It was against everything she had been taught, but she knelt beside him, her hands shaking as she examined his wounds. She had no medical training, but she had a gift, a healing touch, one that had been with her for as long as she could remember. Gently, she began to tend to his wounds, her fingers brushing against his skin, trying to stop the bleeding. She worked quickly, her heart pounding in her chest, praying that she could save him. As the minutes passed, the man's breathing began to steady, his body slowly coming back to life under her care. Lily felt a strange warmth radiating from him, a heat that she couldn't explain. She did not know who he was, nor did she care. All that mattered was that he was alive, and she had done her best to help him. When he finally stirred, his eyes fluttered open, meeting hers for the first time. There was a moment of silence between them, as if the world itself had stopped to witness their meeting. His eyes were cold, silver gray like a stormy sky, yet there was something in them that made Lily's heart skip a beat. He seemed disoriented, confused, but there was an unmistakable air of power surrounding him. And then he spoke, his voice low and rough. "You saved me." Lily froze, unsure of what to say. I didn't know what else to do," she stammered. "I just couldn't leave you." The man studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. And then, something in his gaze shifted, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps curiosity. He sat up, his movements slow and careful. "You're not like the others," he said, his voice tinged with something that sounded like awe. Lily frowned. The others who would have left me to die," he said simply. He paused before adding, "I am not what I seem, but you saved me. For that, you will not regret it." Lily felt a chill run down her spine, but she nodded, unsure of what to make of his words. Little did she know, the man she had just saved was no ordinary stranger. He was the Alpha King, cursed and hiding in plain sight, and he would soon reveal to her a world she had never imagined. A world where destiny had plans for both of them, plans neither of them could escape. "I have never met someone like you before," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that Lily couldn't quite place. She watched him carefully as he shifted slightly, his body still weak, but no longer trembling. The initial fear she had felt upon realizing that he was no ordinary man had begun to fade, replaced with a strange sense of curiosity and even admiration. But that wasn't all. She couldn't shake the feeling that something greater was happening, something she wasn't yet prepared for. Lily took a cautious step back, her eyes never leaving as he tried to push himself upright, his muscles groaning in protest. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper, though she had an inkling that she might not be ready for the answer. The man's lips twisted into something resembling a smile, though it was filled with pain and mystery. He met her gaze, and for a moment, Lily saw something ancient and filled with sorrow, in his silver gray eyes. "I am the Alpha King," he said, his tone low and heavy. But that title means little now. I am cursed, a prisoner to my own power. Lily felt a chill run down her spine. The Alpha King? She had heard of him before, in the whispers and rumors passed among the pack. He was a legend, ruthless, powerful, and feared by all. Yet, the man before her didn't seem to fit that description. His clothes were torn and soiled, his once proud posture hunched in exhaustion. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Lily asked, her brow furrowing. You're the Alpha King, and yet you needed my help? The man closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. I did not choose this, he said, his voice breaking slightly. My curse has isolated me from the world. No one has cared to help me, and I have learned to live in the shadows. But you saved me, not knowing who I truly am, without asking for anything in return. I have not known kindness like that in years. Lily's heart twisted at the raw emotion in his voice. She had never considered herself strong, let alone capable of helping someone as powerful as the Alpha King. She had only acted out of instinct, her need to help those in need, regardless of who they were. I didn't do it for you, or for anyone else, she said, her voice soft but steady. I just couldn't leave you there. The man's gaze softened, and for the first time since their meeting, there was a flicker of warmth in his eyes. And for that, I will be forever grateful, he said, his voice quiet but sincere. Lily could feel the weight of his words, and she couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead for her. She had already helped him, but what did that mean for her now? What did it mean for her future? Before she could ask any more questions, the man slowly stood, his movements cautious but deliberate. He looked at her with something resembling both gratitude and regret. I will make this right, he said, almost to himself. I will make it up to you, for the kindness you've shown me. You have no idea how much this means. His words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken promises. And as he began to walk toward the edge of the clearing, Lily followed, unsure of what was happening but unwilling to turn away. There was something about this man, this Alpha King, that pulled her in, even though she didn't fully understand why. As the two of them walked into the shadows of the forest together, Lily couldn't help but feel as though she had just stepped into something much bigger than herself, something that would change her life forever. The Alpha King's presence was undeniable. As they walked through the dense forest, the air between them felt charged, as though every step was leading them into a deeper mystery. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that she had stepped into a world far beyond her understanding. She had never asked for anything from the man. She had simply helped him. But now, something about the way he carried himself, the weight of his eyes, made her question everything she thought she knew. He was no longer the stranger she had first saved. There was a quiet power in his every movement, a grace in the way he navigated the trees, his posture shifting from the pain-ridden man she had first found to someone much stronger. Lily, however, kept her thoughts to herself. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to ask. All she knew was that the silence between them had a weight of its own. They walked for hours, the evening air cool and crisp as the moon began to rise, casting a silver glow over the path ahead. The Alpha King was a figure of mystery, but Lily was no longer afraid. It wasn't that she didn't respect the power he possessed, she did. But there was something in his vulnerability, something raw and human, that made him approachable. He wasn't just the Alpha King. He was a man who had been through hell, a man who had suffered and was now, somehow, finding his way back. Eventually they reached a clearing, the trees parting to reveal a small, humble cabin tucked away in the heart of the forest. It looked out of place, nestled so far from any pack. But it was perfect in its simplicity. This is where I have been hiding, the Alpha King said quietly, his voice softer than before. I have been cursed, but I was never allowed to stay in one place for long. The pack, they feared me. They thought I had become a monster. Lily took in the cabin with new eyes, realizing that it wasn't just the place that had been hiding, it was him. I don't understand, Lily said, her voice gentle. If you are the Alpha King, why hide here? Why not claim your throne? He sighed, a deep, heavy breath that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. I was cursed by my own power, he explained. My wolf, it turned against me. I became something I could not control, something I feared. I had to leave, for the safety of everyone around me. Lily looked at him, her heart aching for him. She could see the torment in his eyes, the pain of a man who had lost everything but was still trying to protect what little he had left. She stepped closer to him, unsure of what she was doing but feeling the need to comfort him. "But you are still here," she said softly. "You didn't give up." He smiled faintly, a trace of something like hope in his gaze. "No, I didn't. And neither will you, Lily. You've shown me kindness, even when you didn't know who I was. That means something. It means more than I could ever explain." Her name on his lips, the way he said it, filled her with warmth, though she couldn't explain why. He looked down at her, and for a brief moment, Lily felt as though everything in the world had come to this one moment. A man with the power to rule, with the strength to break mountains. Yet here he was, with her, vulnerable and uncertain. "You've already done more for me than I ever thought possible," he said, his voice low. "And I will not forget it." The weight of his words hung between them, and Lily felt the shift in the air, a shift that spoke of destiny. They were no longer strangers, but something more, something bound together by a bond neither of them fully understood yet. She nodded, though she still wasn't sure what all of this meant. She hadn't asked for any of it, but somehow, she felt as though the story of her life had just begun. "I will stay," she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside her. "I will help you however I can." He nodded in return, a flicker of something resembling gratitude in his eyes. "And I will protect you, Lily. I promise you that." The promise lingered in the air between them, unspoken but understood. They were two souls who had met by chance, but now they were bound by something far deeper. The forest seemed to whisper around them, as though it too acknowledged the beginning of something profound. And in that moment, beneath the glowing moonlight, Lily couldn't help but wonder what would come next. The Alpha King had many secrets, and she had just scratched the surface. But for now, she had made her choice. She was here, with him, and whatever the future held, she would face it together with him. The days that followed were a blur of new routines. Lily woke early each morning to the soft light of the sun filtering through the trees, casting golden streaks across the forest floor. The Alpha King, whom she had come to know as Kalen, spent most of his time in the cabin, either in deep thought or working on tasks that seemed far too mundane for someone of his power. At first, Lily wondered how a man who had been the ruler of a vast kingdom could now live in seclusion, performing simple chores. But as she watched him, she began to understand. His curse had stripped him of his former life, leaving him to grapple with a reality far different from the one he had once known. It wasn't just the power that was missing from his life now. It was the connection. The pack had abandoned him, and even though he still carried the title of Alpha King, there was no one left to claim as his own. No one left to rule. Lily, on the other hand, had become an anchor for him in a world where he no longer knew his place. She didn't know what had changed in him since their first meeting, but she could feel the shift. The vulnerability he had once shown so openly was beginning to fade, replaced by a guarded strength, as though he was slowly rebuilding the walls around his heart. It was hard for Lily to understand. She had only helped him because it was the right thing to do. She hadn't expected anything in return, but now, in the quiet moments they shared, she began to realize that she had become something important to him. And she, in turn, had started to rely on him more than she cared to admit. One afternoon, as they sat in the small clearing outside the cabin, Kalen spoke to her about his past. "I used to believe that power was everything," he said, his gaze distant as he stared out at the trees. "That ruling over others, controlling their fates, was the measure of a king's worth. But that was before I lost everything. Before I was cursed." Lily listened, her heart heavy with sympathy. She didn't fully understand the weight of his curse, but she could see the toll it had taken on him. The darkness that had clouded his soul when she first met him was still there, but now, there was a flicker of light in his eyes. It was the light of someone who had been broken and was slowly healing. "And now?" she asked quietly, almost afraid to hear the answer. "Now," Kalen murmured, turning his gaze toward her, "I see things differently. Power doesn't mean anything if you're alone." Lily felt a tightness in her chest at his words. She had always been alone, too. As an Omega, she had never truly been accepted by her pack. Her value had always been determined by her weakness, by the fact that she couldn't shift like the others. But here, with him, she didn't feel like the broken Omega anymore. She felt like someone who mattered, even if she didn't understand why. "You're not alone anymore," she said softly, her words surprising even herself. Kalen looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he smiled. A small, bittersweet smile that tugged at her heart. No, he agreed. I'm not. They spent the rest of the afternoon in silence, the sound of the forest around them the only noise between them. The connection between them had deepened, not through words, but through shared understanding. Kalen had given up his kingdom, his power, but in doing so, he had gained something far more precious. He had found someone who saw him for who he truly was, not the Alpha King, not the cursed ruler, but just a man who had lost his way and was now trying to find it again. And Lily, for the first time in her life, felt as though she had found someone who saw her, not as the weak Omega, but as someone capable of something greater. As the evening fell and the first stars began to twinkle above, Lily couldn't help but feel that her life was no longer just a series of quiet days in the forest. It had become something more, something with the potential for change. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hope. And that was enough. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, the bond between Lily and Kalen grew stronger. They worked together in the small cabin, tending to the fire, gathering herbs, and preparing food. It was simple, peaceful work, but it was more than that. It was a shared existence, a quiet understanding that spoke volumes. Lily had never imagined a life like this. She had always been an outcast, an Omega with no place, no home. But here, in the quiet of the forest, she felt a sense of belonging she had never known. Kalen, the Alpha King, was no longer just the powerful ruler she had once feared. He had become something else entirely, a man with his own wounds, his own struggles, and his own need for companionship. He was no longer the untouchable king, but a man who had learned to live with his curse and his solitude. Despite the small, quiet moments they shared, there was always a weight in the air between them, a silent understanding that things were changing. Kalen had not yet spoken of his future plans, but Lily could see the restlessness in him. There were moments when his eyes would drift toward the horizon, a far-off look in his gaze, as if he were waiting for something. It was in those moments that Lily would see the true depth of his burden, the weight of a throne he no longer held, the loss of a kingdom that no longer existed. And as much as he tried to hide it, she knew he was struggling with what it all meant. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in a warm, golden light, Kalen finally spoke of his past. They sat on the porch of the cabin, the quiet of the night settling around them like a blanket. I used to think I was invincible, Kalen said, his voice low and thoughtful. That nothing could touch me, that power was all I needed. But now I see the truth. Power is nothing without the people to share it with. Lily looked at him, her heart heavy with understanding. You don't have to carry it alone, she said quietly. I'm here. He turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that took her breath away. For a moment, the world seemed to fall away, leaving just the two of them. I don't know how to stop, Kalen admitted, his voice strained. I don't know how to let go of the man I once was. The king, the ruler. I don't know how to be anything else. Lily reached out, placing a hand on his. You don't have to stop, she said gently. But you can let yourself be more than that. You're more than just the Alpha King. You're Kalen. His eyes softened at her words, and for the first time, Lily saw a flicker of peace in his gaze. It was a small thing, but it was enough. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of the forest around them the only noise. The stars had begun to appear in the sky, twinkling like diamonds against the darkening blue. Lily had never seen the sky so clear, so beautiful. And in that moment, she realized that this quiet, simple life, was something she had never thought she would find. She had found a purpose here, a place where she was needed, where she could be something more than just the Omega who had been cast aside. She could be someone who mattered. Kalen's hand tightened around hers, a silent promise. They didn't speak for the rest of the evening, but in that silence, they both knew that things were changing. And for the first time in a long time, Lily felt a sense of hope for the future. A future that, for the first time, didn't seem so uncertain. The following days were filled with a new sense of purpose, but also with a growing tension that neither Lily nor Kalen could ignore. They had settled into a routine that worked for them both, but there were still unspoken questions lingering in the air. Lily could feel Kalen's internal struggle every time his gaze would wander off into the distance, his thoughts clearly somewhere far beyond their little cabin in the woods. One evening, as the fire crackled in the hearth and the shadows of the night stretched long across the cabin, Kalen finally spoke. "Lily," he said, his voice hesitant. "I cannot stay here forever." Lily looked up from the fire, startled by the sudden weight of his words. She had known, deep down, that this peaceful existence couldn't last. There was a part of her that had been bracing for this moment, yet hearing him say it out loud still felt like a blow to her chest. "I understand," she said softly, though the words tasted bitter on her tongue. "But you don't have to go alone. I'm here, Kalen. I'm here to help, to support you, whatever comes next." Kalen's eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was something vulnerable in his gaze. "It's not about being alone," he said quietly. "It's about what I've left behind. The kingdom, the pack, the people who used to look to me for guidance. I abandoned them, and I cannot help but wonder if they still need me. If I am still their king." Lily could see the conflict tearing at him, the weight of his title and his curse bearing down on him like a heavy storm. She wanted to say something comforting, to offer him words of reassurance, but the truth was, she didn't know what to say. She couldn't fully understand the burden he carried. All she knew was that, in her heart, she didn't want him to leave. She had found something here, with him, that she never thought was possible. A sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. But she also knew that Kalen's journey was his own to make. "You are more than just a king, Kalen," Lily said, her voice firm with the conviction that had built inside her. "You are a person. You are someone who deserves happiness, who deserves peace, just like anyone else." His eyes softened at her words, and for a brief moment, she saw a flicker of something in him, a glimmer of the man he used to be, before the curse and the power and the loss. "I wish I could believe that," he murmured. "But how do I walk away from everything I once was? From the responsibilities that came with my title?" Lily stepped closer to him, her hand resting gently on his arm. "You don't have to walk away from it all," she said. "But you can take control of your own life now. You don't have to let your title define who you are. You are not a monster, Kalen. And you don't have to carry this burden alone anymore." He was silent for a long time, his eyes lost in thought, before he finally spoke again. "I don't know if I can do this, Lily. I don't know if I can be what I need to be, for myself, or for anyone else." Lily gave him a small, reassuring smile. "One step at a time," she said gently. "We'll figure it out together." Kalen seemed to consider her words for a moment before nodding slowly. "Together," he echoed, his voice soft. For the first time in a long while, Lily saw a hint of hope in his eyes. It was fleeting, but it was there. And in that moment, she knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it side by side. The journey would not be easy, but they would no longer be alone. As the fire burned low and the night grew deeper, Lily and Kalen sat together in the quiet of the cabin, both uncertain of the future but certain of one thing. They would face it together. The following morning, the air was crisp with the scent of pine, and the sun peeked through the trees, casting soft light onto the cabin's wooden floor. Lily had awoken early, as usual, tending to the fire and preparing a simple breakfast. As the first rays of sunlight stretched across the forest, she could hear Kalen moving inside the cabin. He was up early too, but for reasons far beyond the simple routine they had settled into. She knew he had been thinking about his past, about what lay ahead. It had become increasingly clear that Kalen was still struggling with the idea of his future, his place in a world that had moved on without him. But the truth was, so was Lily. She had found a sense of belonging here, with him, in this secluded corner of the world. But what would happen if Kalen chose to leave? What would happen if he decided to return to his kingdom, to reclaim the power that he had once held? It was a question that lingered in the back of her mind, though she was too afraid to voice it. As the fire crackled, she looked up to see Kalen standing at the doorway, his gaze focused on the horizon. The light from the rising sun illuminated his face, casting shadows that only seemed to deepen the mystery in his eyes. He was silent for a moment, as if lost in thought. Lily watched him, wondering what was going through his mind. Finally, he spoke. "Lily," he said, his voice steady but filled with an emotion she couldn't quite place. "I've been thinking." Lily's heart skipped a beat. She had grown used to the silence between them, the unspoken connection that had begun to form over the past few weeks. But this felt different. This felt like a moment where everything would change. About what? She asked, her voice soft, but there was an edge of uncertainty in her words. Kalen turned to face her, and for the first time in a long while, there was something like hope in his eyes. About us, he said. About what I've been running from, and what I'm afraid to face. Lily felt her breath catch in her throat. She had known, deep down, that this moment would come. The moment when Kalen would have to confront his past and make a decision about the future. But she hadn't expected it to come so soon. What do you mean? She asked, stepping closer to him, her voice barely a whisper. Kalen's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, he looked vulnerable. I've spent so much time hiding, so much time running from the man I used to be. I've been so afraid of what I've lost that I forgot to think about what I could still have. Lily could feel her heart racing. And what is that? She asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Kalen reached out, his hand brushing against hers. I don't know yet, he said quietly, but I want to find out. With you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Lily could feel the weight of them, but she didn't know what to say. She had always known that Kalen was the key to her own future, but now, hearing him speak those words, she realized that she, too, was the key to his. They didn't need to have all the answers right away. They didn't need to know exactly what the future held. All they needed was to take the next step together. And with that, the world seemed to open up before them. The past, with all its pain and regret, no longer seemed as heavy. The future, with all its uncertainty, didn't feel so daunting. They would face it together, whatever came next. Kalen looked at her, his expression softening. Are you willing to take that step with me? He asked, his voice low and filled with a quiet sincerity. Lily nodded, a small but firm smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Yes, she said, her voice steady, filled with conviction. I will. I'll take that step with you. And for the first time in a long while, Kalen smiled back at her. It was small, but it was enough. Together, they would face whatever came next, no matter how uncertain the path ahead seemed. The weight of the past was still there, but it no longer felt like a burden. With each other, they were stronger. They could face the future, side by side. As the days went on, Lily and Kalen's bond grew even stronger, but the weight of his past still loomed over him. They continued to live in the cabin, finding solace in the simplicity of their shared life. However, Lily could feel the restlessness returning to Kalen. There were times when his gaze would drift off into the distance, as if he were torn between staying in this peaceful existence with her and returning to the world he once ruled. She knew that his journey was far from over, and the struggle between his past and his future was something only he could resolve. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Lily noticed the familiar tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers tightened around his mug. Kalen, she said softly, what's on your mind? He hesitated, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. I've been thinking about what you said, he finally admitted. About being more than just the Alpha King. About finding who I am beyond the throne and the curse. Lily's heart tightened, and she waited patiently, allowing him the space to speak. I've spent so many years trying to live up to something I thought was expected of me, Kalen continued. I was always the ruler, the king. But I've realized that I've never taken the time to think about who I am when I'm not wearing that crown. Who am I really? The question hung in the air between them, and Lily could feel the weight of it. She knew that Kalen had spent so long hiding behind his title, his power, that he had never allowed himself to explore what he truly wanted. You are more than the title, Kalen, she said gently. You're a man with hopes and dreams. You have your own desires, your own heart. He turned to her, his expression softening. I didn't know if I was allowed to have those things, he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought being a king meant sacrificing everything else. Lily reached out, taking his hand in hers. You don't have to sacrifice everything, Kalen. You can be the man you want to be, not just the king you were forced to become. Kalen looked at her, his eyes filled with both uncertainty and gratitude. But what if I'm not enough? He asked. What if I can't be the man I want to be? What if I'm still broken? Lily squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with warmth. You are enough, Kalen, she said with unwavering certainty. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. For the first time, Kalen smiled, a true smile that reached his eyes. It was a smile of hope, of possibility. And in that moment, Lily realized that they were both healing. Together, they were both learning to find their place in the world, not defined by their pasts or their titles, but by who they were at their core. The fire crackled between them, its warmth reflecting the quiet understanding that had grown between them. Kalen took a deep breath, as if finally allowing himself to release the burden he had carried for so long. "I think I'm ready," he said, his voice steady. "Ready to take that next step. Ready to figure out who I am, not just for the world, but for myself." Lily smiled, her heart full. "Then let's take it together," she said softly. And for the first time in a long time, both of them felt like they were standing on the threshold of something new, something beautiful. The future was still uncertain, but they no longer felt alone. They would face it side by side, each learning to embrace who they truly were. Kalen, the man who had once ruled with power, and Lily, the Omega who had never been seen, had finally found their way back to each other. And together, they would find the peace they had both been searching for. The morning sun rose over the forest, painting the sky with soft hues of pink and gold, a new day beginning for Lily and Kalen. They stood together at the edge of the clearing, where the forest met the horizon. The world felt different now, as if the weight of the past was no longer pressing down on them. The future still felt uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, they were no longer afraid to face it. Kalen had taken the first step, letting go of the title that had once defined him. He had begun to see himself not as the king he had been, but as the man he could become. And Lily, the Omega who had never been seen for who she truly was, had found her strength not in what others expected of her, but in the quiet, simple life she had built with him. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Kalen asked, his voice low and steady. He looked at her, his eyes filled with both uncertainty and hope. Lily smiled, a soft, reassuring smile that was full of warmth. "I've been ready," she said, her voice steady, filled with the kind of certainty that only came from knowing who you were and where you were meant to be. Kalen reached out, taking her hand in his, their fingers entwining in a quiet promise. "Then let's walk this path together," he said, his voice filled with determination. Together, they stepped forward, moving toward the unknown, but no longer alone. The world around them was still the same, but they were different now. They had found something that neither of them had ever expected, a life that was theirs to shape, free from the burdens of the past. As they walked side by side, the trees whispered in the breeze, as if acknowledging the new journey they were beginning. The sun rose higher in the sky, its golden rays warming their faces, and Lily felt a sense of peace that she had never known before. She was no longer the rejected Omega, the one cast aside. She was someone who had found her place in the world, someone who mattered. And Kalen, the Alpha King who had once ruled with fear and power, had found his true self, not through his title, but through the quiet strength that came from letting go. They didn't need to have all the answers, didn't need to know exactly where their path would lead. All they needed was to walk it together. As they continued forward, side by side, the future no longer seemed so uncertain. It was theirs to shape, to create, and they would do it together. For the first time in a long time, both Lily and Kalen knew that they were not defined by their pasts, but by the choices they made in the present. And whatever the future held, they would face it with courage, hope, and each other.